It's 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome. As I mentioned in the outset a couple minutes ago, if you are joining online, I invite you guys to please share your video if you feel comfortable doing that. It makes a big difference, especially as we're meeting virtually. My name is Stephanie Charrington. I am the Executive Director of the backbone of Eastside Pathways. For those joining for the first time and you're not familiar with Eastside Pathways, Eastside Pathways first and foremost is a community partnership of individuals, public, private, and nonprofit organizations, all working to improve the way that we work together so that we get better outcomes for kids from cradle to career. During this crisis time period, the backbone, which you can think of as the staff of the partnership, our role for the partnership has always been to convene, to facilitate, bring together data and communication. We're shifting our work to really support the broader community during this time. So these are drop-in meetings for people to join. And we actually started this back on March 17th, if you can believe it. And we are entering into our last week of 2 meetings per week. We made that commitment back in March that we would convene a couple of times a week through March 23rd. So Thursday will be our last convening for 2 times a week. We did hear from you all that you wanted to continue these. And most people said, although it was close, most people said they wanted to go to 1 time per week. So we will be continuing those 1 time per week. There'll be a poll towards the latter part of this meeting on which of those days, Tuesday or Thursday, works for you. So again, welcome. I do want to introduce quickly our team that's here with us today from the backbone, and I'm going to invite those guys to wave. So first we have Sandy Nathan, who is our Community Impact Manager. Sandy will be facilitating today's convening. We also have Kalika Curry, who is also a Community Impact Manager or facilitator for our work. Unfortunately, she's not able to make it today. We also have here with us today Peyton Richardson, who is our Data Officer, Joe Trotty, who is our Communications Manager, and Vicki Yu, who is running everything from behind the scenes here, who is our Business and Operations Manager. So moving along to some of the logistics, I'm going to kind of go through this rather quickly, but in case this is your first time joining us, welcome again. I invite you to join via video if you can. If you are joining on the phone, I invite you to, during this meeting, this convening, if you want to unmute yourself, please press *6. Otherwise, others joining in can simply hit the space bar. That's a little Zoom trick. If you're on mute and you want to contribute quickly, you can just hit the space bar and hold it down to contribute. I also invite you guys to have a notepad, pen and pencil handy as well. Though everything is going to be recorded, this convening is recorded, sorry, as well as will the breakout groups be recorded. There'll be a summary of the chat that gets really, really busy. As you can see, folks are starting to add into the chat there. Thank you. A summary is all sent out at the end of the day. However, the big part of this work is the opportunity to make connections and take action between these calls. So be sure to have that pen and pencil handy so that you can take notes on actions that you want to take or people with whom you may want to connect afterwards. Thanks to those already starting to put in your name, the neighborhood organization that you're part of, and your contact information. We appreciate that. In addition to the recordings that'll be sent out, we also send out a roster of everybody who has participated, including email addresses. If for some reason you do not want to be included in that roster, please feel free to send a direct message via chat to Joe Trotty, and he'll be sure to take you off. If you have not found the chat button, simply move your cursor. You can see the chat icon down there. Click on that, and you'll start to see the ribbon of chat on your screen. And that, as I said, lots of great information is communicated and shared via that chat. So thank you again to everybody who is including your name and contact information. So we invite you to sit back, relax, take care of your needs, and again, everything will be recorded. So the meeting series purpose here, for those who are familiar, you know this already, it's the opportunity to, of course, first and foremost, strengthen relationships, because when this work gets hard, which it does, we oftentimes have to lean in on those relationships. So that is a big result coming out of these regular convenings. Also, we want to make sure that we're sharing opportunities for resources and support out there between organizations and individuals in community. It's the opportunity to reduce duplication and fill in gaps. And most important here, as we talk about frequently, it's the opportunity to take action between these calls. By the power of Zoom, we're going to be going into breakout sessions, including here in just a minute, as we go into our gracious space. I do want to note that you do not need to log off and log back in. It's simply done by the power of Zoom. So let's go ahead and go into gracious space here. So gracious space, for those who are familiar and those who are not, is the opportunity to allow everybody to contribute their voice. It's to welcome everybody here. It's to invite the voices of those who may not be on the call. And it is the opportunity to center our minds into the work that we're about to do. Because so much of what we do here is learning from each other, what we want to have the opportunity to talk about this morning and allow everybody to share is how can you increase your comfort with learning in public. So we're going to go into breakout sessions here, and I'm going to model what that looks like, because we have to do it rather rapidly, because we want to allow everybody to have the opportunity to share. So my name is Stephanie, and I like to increase my comfort with learning in public by ensuring that those relationships, I have an opportunity to build those relationships with one another. So I'm going to ask Vicki. Vicki, can you transport us? I also want to mention that, and a thank you to Tom and Kathy, who are both board members of Eastside Pathways, who will be helping support during these breakout sessions for your gracious space. So Vicki, feel free to transport us whenever you can. Okay, super. Can we have like 1 or 2 thoughts just to share quickly, since we only have just a couple of seconds here before we have to move on to data? It's always really helpful for others to hear from into the larger group. So if 1 or 2 people are willing to unmute or share in the chat box as well, that would be great.
Hi, this is Judy. Oh, go ahead.
This is Tom Brewer, and in our group, a keyword came out. It was the word humility.
Thanks, Tom. I like that. Judy, I also heard you trying to share as well. Thank you.
Yes, key ideas from our breakout were trust, relationships. Both of those things are necessary, as well as be prepared to fail and keep going.
Those are great. Thank you. We heard those in our breakout too. So thank you for sharing that, Judy. All right, we're going to move forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Peyton to share a little bit about data.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you again, as we do every day, every week. Thank you for joining us and coming to learn and share resources and work towards solutions. So today we're going to briefly talk, starting with just thanking all the folks that have been on the calls, individuals, organizations that have really come together over these past 10, now 11 virtual meetings as we work towards solutions for here in East King County. So Again, these are just summary stats and they're on the website, but we just want to make sure that we give a proper shout out to each and every one of you who have stuck with us and grown with us on these calls. You know, as we talked about increasing our learning in public, a lot of what we're doing right now is learning in public. So thank you all for modeling that in over these past, I guess, five weeks now. So I also want to make sure to thank Alma and Niso as we move to the next slide. As we've talked about for the past couple meetings, we talked about this egg chart model, which is a tool within a facilitation technique called Equitable Results Series that Eastside Pathways uses. And this tool specifically looks at how we can allow data to drive and hone our strategies to work for a focused population. So I want to thank Niso, and Alma will be speaking a little bit later with Sandy, but I wanted to make sure that we thank them for allowing us to kind of use them as an example here. So again, the egg chart physically is, you know, looks the same as it did over the past few weeks, the past few calls, but focusing specifically on Niso's mission. So we have their result statement at the top, and as we look at the egg chart, we look at on the rightmost little box, the entire egg, the universe, if you will. And the result statement that we have written here, all Hispanic and Latino children are supported and prepared to enter kindergarten. That ideally, those result statements are to really get to the whole population. So this is a whole population goal. And when we use this egg chart model, we are recognizing that we need to figure out where the capacity lies, where the authority lies, where the locus of control lies, so that we can really hone in on a specific strategy to affect that result statement. So obviously, looking at, you know, all Hispanic Latino individuals in King County, that may be the entire result statement, but we're going to hone in a little bit to a subset, which is, again, the system population. And we have cities in East King County. And again, we're looking at the whole population and then looking at Hispanic or Latino individuals in those cities. And again, the point of doing this is to make sure that we can really hone in on precisely what on precisely how, you know, the organization can be most effective in driving solutions. So the system population, again, we have, there will be limited authority and some familiarity, but not necessarily complete familiarity with either the systems or the providers or the school districts. So we recognize that we're not done yet. So is and depending on what your agency population or your reach is, these may be different. But for NISO, they really wanted to hone in on families in these two school districts. So again, we have we have Hispanic or Latino students who ideally would serve as proxies for Hispanic or Latino families in those school districts. And in this agency population, as we move to the left, we are making sure that the ability to navigate these systems, the familiarity with these systems, familiarity with the communities that are served by these systems is going to increase. So within each layer of the egg, we are increasing our authority, our familiarity, our ability to affect change. And then finally here in the yolk, the center, the program population, we have families with children aged 0 to 5 recruited by NISO. So the key thing about these numbers here is obviously, there are more than 34 families, in the Bellevue and Lake Washington School District, and there are far more than 45 children aged 0 to 5 in that area. But these numbers represent families that were recruited by NISO and by the Eastside Early Learning Facilitators. I'll touch upon that in a second. But what I wanted to make sure to bring up was that this is a very targeted strategy, looking at the resources, looking at the capacity, and making sure that the program can impact these 34 families or these 45 students as fully and wholly as possible, making sure that strategies and practices, policies, and procedures of these providers can actually impact these families, as well as families in each subsequent larger section of the egg. So I will briefly talk a little bit about the Eastside Early Learning Facilitators, the EELF. These are community members who are trained and recruited by NISO programs within the Promotoris model to collect info from families that are impacted by these services, to provide information to families about services, and to assist in making connections, so helping these families make connections to these services. And the services that they are looking at, again, are all really focused on this age group of kids 0 to 5 and their families. So looking at health services, education and support services, basic needs services, and parent-child services. And within, in this first cycle that the EELF have just completed, they serve these 34 families and 45 kids between September 2019 and February 2020. And in addition to looking at how data can really inform the strategy, NISO has done an amazing job in making sure that they are both collaborating and empowering families and communities. And we'll talk about that. Sandy will talk about that in a little bit. But one of the reasons we really wanted to highlight this is that this is an organization that has decided that families that are being impacted by providers that provide services around health and education and basic needs should be a part of the solution. So making sure that community members themselves are the ones who are speaking with families and kind of leaning in on all their institutional knowledge, as well as the relationships that they already have, to really push solutions, making sure that the services that these providers have are equitable and that they can remain equitable. And if they're not equitable, that they can actually increase their equity. And the goal is, once we work on that program population, and once those families feel that their needs are met, and those children feel that their needs are met, and the Eastside Early Learning Facilitators, have collected and provided information and assisted in connecting families, then the strategies that the providers have used and the tactics that they have used to increase their equity can actually flow into the larger parts of the egg chart. And again, the overall result statement of all Hispanic and Latino children supported and prepared to enter kindergarten can truly be realized if, at this focus population, the strategies and tactics can be carried out, and ideally carried out throughout larger populations, as we look at all the different ways that providers can be effective and can increase their equity, and families can increase their knowledge and increase their agency in seeking help and being able to navigate the system. So, so again, this is an egg chart, another example of one of our partner organizations, NISO programs, who's doing incredible work to not only empower families and empower the community, but ideally help create and change systems so that more equity can be present within these providers of health, education, basic needs, and parent-child services. So I'm going to move us on. And we're going to go to our journal prompt. So as always, please do unmute and share or type in the chat, or I can lift something up, or journal on your own. As we just talked about, we want to make sure that we look at trends and reveal gaps for all demographics. We want to make sure that we can get data that is useful for all people, even those that are not, in a large population group. So the effective question here is, how does this aggregated data inform your COVID-19 response strategies? Consider both qualitative and quantitative. And I just want to make sure that we understand that each of us, has the opportunity to collect data, big and small, and stories and numbers and anecdotes. And I think especially right now, it's really, really important that each of us feels kind of the duty to collect some data, because things are moving so rapidly and there are so many disparate impacts for a lot of folks, and folks that, you know, may have been left behind. We really want to figure out who those folks are and figure out exactly what strategies and tactics and strategies we can use to help those folks. So when you think about that question, remember that I think it's, especially right now, it's both kind of the opportunity and a responsibility for all of us to figure out how we can collect data at every level, at the executive level, at the program level, at the systems level, you know, at the personal level. How are strategies being informed by data? So again, as usual, I'm going to stop talking quickly and let you all type in the chat or speak out.
Hey, Peyton, it's Tammy with Bellevue Nourishing Networks. This data just brings up more questions for me. When I get numbers about how many meals have gone out from Bellevue School District meal program, and the numbers are not really jiving with the number of students that are in our schools, I start to ask questions. Who aren't we serving, and why? Why is this happening? And it kind of drives me to think about, is it communication? Is it what Angie and Carlos just talked about during our gracious space? Is it that we need to get into these areas where we don't know whether or not families are understanding that there's food out there and this is where you can get it. So it's really driving me to push harder as I look at all this data. So thanks.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that is, you know, that couldn't have been said better. We're really trying to model where those gaps are between, you know, what populations are out there and what populations are getting served, and who falls into any of those gaps.
From Centro Cultural Emprendedor Mexicano. I think Tammy just hit right on the dot. I think the biggest problem with the unrepresented communities is the communication. They do not understand most of the process. It's not that they just don't have the knowledge. They have kids that can help them try to navigate. But I think the big mistake that we are making is not speaking the proper language. There's proper language. A lot of the documents that I have seen, many of them, they just translated by computer. That doesn't work. I keep stating that. So I think communication is going to be the key if we're going to continue trying to serve those disadvantaged communities. One of the things that I like to say that the Centro Cultural is going to start doing between this week and next week, we're going to set up live podcast and also a radio station, so we can try to communicate better with the communities and tell them what kind of services are out there and how can they take advantage of it. So to me, I'm going to say one more time, I think it's the way we are trying to communicate with those unrepresented communities.
Thank you. I think that, again, super helpful, and again, speaks really to the gap between what we're, you know, what we want to do, how material are translated, and, you know, how they're landing on the community. And I thank you all for those who are typing in the chat. I want to move us on, but feel free to email me if you have more thoughts on this. But this is a incredibly rich conversation. I'm actually going to hand it to Sandy, who's going to lead us in further facilitation on community engagement.
Hey, thanks, Peyton, and hi, everyone. I see some great stuff being shared on the chat. I also want to thank Alma Gonzalez from NISO for sharing the data on the work that you're driving. In these meetings, we are looking to offer tools that you can take and use back in your organization. And Peyton has been sharing about the egg chart. Egg chart is a tool that really helps you understand the connection between the whole population and the program population, and to get a clear view of the scope and scale of your work. So another tool that we have been sharing on our calls is the community engagement spectrum that you're seeing on the screen now. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I'm just going to spend a couple of seconds explaining this scale to you. The scale, like you see, starts from the left side end, which is the technical solutions, working up to the adaptive solutions. In an emergency or a crisis like we are in now, where we are working through unprecedented and unpredictable situations, the default is to really get into technical solutioning. So there's a need, for example, there's a need for food. We know that there's an increasing need for food. We have food sites, and there are n number of food sites open for X amount of time. And then when you get into calls like this, we hear the community talk about there are undocumented folks who are experiencing fear and anxiety, and they don't feel very welcome, or they don't feel very safe going to these food sites. Or we also heard few people lift up saying there's just a 15-minute window, and that's not really working for families that have to walk about 15 minutes to get to those sites. And that is when you start moving from the left-hand side of the technical solutions into the adaptive spaces where we are co-creating and co-developing solutions with the impacted audience and the community. I'd like you to take 30 seconds here, grab that notepad and that pencil that Stephanie reminded you to keep next to you, and think about where you are at on the scale. And it's completely fine to be in the technical side, because that's where everybody starts. So jot down for yourself where you're at, and think about one step. Small step is everything is counted. One step that you can take to move to the right side of the scale. As you're working through that and making that journal prompt for yourself, I'd like to tell you what to expect in this section. We have invited 2 of our partners who are at different points on the scale to share with us through a fishbowl interview practice. The way that fishbowl works, for those of you who haven't participated in a fishbowl activity before, we have an inner circle, those that are sharing, and then an outer circle, which is all of us. I will have some prompt questions, which I'll ask to the folks in the inner circle. They will be sharing from their experience, from the work that they are doing. The role that each of you play in the outer circle is that of an observer. So you're actively listening as the inner circle is sharing. And then we have 2 partners, like I said. I'll invite one at a time. They will be sharing, and we will have our charting guru, Peyton, who will be charting for us, and he will be doing it using the factor analysis model. I will speak more to that when we get to it, but then just to give you an idea of what factor analysis is, factor analysis really is a tool that helps you list down factors that are helping and supporting to move your work forward, and then factors that are acting as clogs, factors that are impeding you from moving your work forward. And it's really important that you have a clear view of what's working for you, what you can leverage, and the clogs, clear view of the clogs as well, so you can think about strategies to work around it. At this point, I'm going to ask you, are we clear about what we are trying to do in this section? We are inviting 2 partners who are at different points in the scale to engage in an informal interview, a fishbowl activity. Everybody else will be on mute. You're observers, you're actively listening, taking notes for what's coming up. Peyton will be charting as they share. In the end, for 5 minutes, I will be opening up the floor for each of you to just popcorn style share what you have experienced and what's coming up for you. With that, I will move to inviting Alma Gonzalez from NISO to be our first partner who will be sharing. Peyton, can you take controls and move us to the whiteboarding, please? Thank you so much. Alma, can you please unmute yourself? And I'd also like to say that If there's anybody else from NISO that would like to jump in, I know that Kathy Habib is NISO's advisor. So at any point, if any of you want to jump in, just feel free to do that. Alma, are you on mute?
Yes.
Welcome, Alma. So what we are talking about, so the baseline really is, what are the factors that are helping you and what are the factors that are impeding you, which is coming in the way, like a roadblock, in supporting the community that you're serving through this crisis. I'd like you to specifically hold in mind populations that are often missed. Alma, where would you like to start? Factors that are supporting you, the pluses, or factors that are impeding you?
Well, well, let's start with the factors that are impeding us, and then we go to ended up with the good news.
Super. End it with the good news. I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the factors that are impeding us to moving forward, like we've been talking before, is the working remotely and virtual medium, you know, all this technology stuff. So limited technology, either way, access to the technology or especially knowledge and technology. That's one of the things that impeding us very much to move forward. Also, like you was mentioned, someone mentioned before, a fear in the community to access to services because those services could be limited factor when they in terms of immigration process.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the organizations still making it a little bit difficult for access to the services.
Okay.
You know, in terms of documents or papers that we need to provide, and to get the information from the resources. Either way, getting to our community on time or on our language. You know, so that's been a big.
Just to make sure that I'm hearing you and we have that captured, you mean not one is the requirements, what the organizations need to get access to their resources, and the other you spoke about is the accessibility, right? Like channels through which the information is being shared. Am I right?
Yes, that's the two ways, exactly. Mm-hmm. You know, okay. some of that will be to the resources and how walk us through the process to get to those resources. Mm-hmm. And another one, it will be like get the information to the resources on time. Mm-hmm. You know, so in a manner that the community can understand it, because I tell you the technology has been a little bit challenged, and now everything is moving through that direction. Mm-hmm. That in the other way, that will be it just tied it with that. You know, it's been a little bit more on be co-creators and the solution of how those mm-hmm. Resources get to the community. Mm-hmm. This has been a challenge too, because sometimes community haven't been asked how you receive this information, how can we work together to get to the point of service mm-hmm. on the community. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also want to lift up, thank you so much for sharing this, Alma. This is really critical for us to hear from you as a community leader and as an organization that works so closely with the Latino community. I also heard Nick lift up in one of the breakouts that he was a part of, which I was facilitating, about the misinformation in the community. So they are getting information from multiple sources, and a lot of it might be misinformation. So can you speak about that?
Yes, sometimes exactly, because it is so many sources where the information comes to one place and then another place and another place, you know, and we sometimes getting information more like in a broken phone type of thing, and the information don't come directly from the organization, directly from the source where it was originally coming through. So yes, the community get confused, who I listen, who I not. And that's what I'm saying, that co-partnership with the community themselves, that's very important. It's very important. Needs to start doing some of those series of conversations, you know, every week, mm-hmm. where the facilitators are part of that, and our dreams will be invite more people from the community to get this information directly from the source of is originated on their language, so we can we can move a little bit more forward.
Excellent. So are you okay to move to the pluses, the factors that are supporting you in doing your work effectively and driving to action? Can we move to that side now?
Yes. Well, definitely. And the first thing that I will say, that's the team of facilitators or promotores that we have in NISO. People who's really connected in the community, who's holding the grassroots, what we're calling of the community. It's been the number one. What I say, the heart of the whole situation right now. Because we are together. In the community. Also, we have. Worked before with what Peyton was mentioning with the EELF. It's so difficult to pronounce by letters, but the Eastside Learning Facilitator program that we created with and with the King County and Eastside Pathway. They also put us on the spot with the community, so to be a credible resource for the community and for the organizations to be that communication way with the information or the changes. Eastside Pathway help us allow also with the strategies that we creating to get to those resources and to get to those organizations as well. And also the relationships that we all make, that we have with NISO and some of the other partners, like, I don't know, I can mention Jubilee Rich came through and say, what do you need? What I can do it for helping the community, so, and Baby Corner and many other organizations, they're adding to helping us to get these resources and information to the community. Definitely it's been those strong bonding previous relationship and the ones that we're making right now as well.
Excellent. So you did name allies in the form of providers and organizations that are working with you and reaching out to see how you can participate in co-developing so that their resources can reach the community. Excellent. Thank you for sharing this, Alma. I'd like to use the last minute that we have with you to really think about visioning. Like, what is your hope for the community? What is your hope that, how best are you hoping that we can serve the community, and what are your fears?
I just hope that the community in SAIL will become to be partners or co-creators of solutions on any, not only on times of difficult situations like right now, but in most of the times, so be part of the team. And definitely if the community moving forward, we have more opportunities to be part of the new normal, to be having access to technology and having access to the knowledge of the technology as well. That will be one of the hopes, and so that way we can be part of those, like this type of meetings or other ones as well. And my biggest fear will be very tight with that one, Sandy, that we've been a little bit mute in times like this.
Thank you so much, Alma. I think this was absolutely amazing to hear from you, bringing the voice of the community to this group. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Helen Wong from Chinese Information and Services Center to be our guest, the other partner that I spoke about, and we will walk through the same process. Helen, can you please unmute yourself at this point?
Already done.
Hey, Helen.
Hey.
Thank you for agreeing to share with us. We will go through a similar process. I want to think about the factors that are helping you and the factors that are impeding you and being able to support the community that is your audience.
Yeah, I think I want to.
Helen?
Yes, I think I want to follow what Alma did and talk about some of the barriers first. So appreciate the platform to be able to share our experiences. I think, Sandy, you mentioned something that's very important that I've heard in some of the collaborative work that we're doing is that a lot of it is technical, some technical systems have been set up. Some people have said mainstream services have set up, and then now we're kind of exploring what are some of those critical gaps rather than sort of, as Alma was saying, some of that co-creation that needs to happen if this were to happen again. But just sort of instrumentally, time, resources, and people power. We have developed a rapid response team to address some of these urgent needs. But what we're realizing is that, as somebody was saying earlier, linguistic, being able to speak the languages and being able to provide that type of support has been a huge demand for our agency. So we've had staff working overtime till 8 p.m. just to sort of even touch the surface in regards to being able to meet some of the needs of the families. We're translating and disseminating material that is not just translating general information, but information that's really relevant to support equitable access to resources in a timely way.
Mm-hmm. What sort of a fear is coming up? What is the community speaking to? What are they fearing most in these times?
Yes, so in our particular community, there's been a lot of issue about getting relevant information about COVID-19, fear of discrimination, fear of going outside in safety, being blamed for the virus. We've had a lot of anecdotal experiences about blaming and being labeled and attributing the virus to a group and a culture. And yeah, it's just generally feeling safe.
Yeah,
I think too, I just wanted to highlight that there's a huge issue in regards to disproportionality, not just with the Chinese community, but other communities of color, Indigenous, Black and Brown communities, and really how do you work together in this climate that can be very divisive in a political climate to create solidarity when there is a perceived a shortage of resources. So I really want to focus on providing that equity lens to say that, how do we create solutions that are not about divvying in silos, but really sort of creating that alliance.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Helen. I'm sure it's tough to work through this and know that you have limited capacity and the need is overflowing. I'd like to see if you have any other factors that is coming up as an impediment before we move on to factors that are supporting you in moving this work forward.
Yeah, I think we're learning as we go as well, such as the time it takes for technology literacy, spending time with families on how to navigate and understand how to work with Zoom or how to, work with FaceTime. Yeah, and as I was saying, this weekend we had over 186 calls alone on unemployment on the weekend and a staff of 2 to 3. Wow. So, yes, we're trying as much as we can. And so that's why sometimes it's difficult. I am in a different position, but just difficult to be on these coalition calls and collecting the data. We are doing that, and but it is a challenge as you provide these direct service on the go.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Helen. I would like us to move to the factors that support you in being able to meet the needs of your community.
Yeah, we definitely I don't want to miss that. I mean, we have a resilient community. We have a lot of community members that are, it's impacted, but are volunteering, providing food to healthcare workers, making masks for healthcare workers, and doing as much as they can. We have community partners that have reached out. We have funders that understand and are adaptable and willing to work with us in regards to providing emergency planning. And we have staff that are incredible. You know, I cannot go on in regards to, and our staff and the agency has been committed to really hiring from the community. So they're really affected simultaneously as they're supporting other members in their community. So I'm really proud of that.
Right. And thank you so much for this sharing. And I would like to use our last minute together to really think about what are your hopes for, as we are constantly solutioning and strategizing to meet the needs. But if you were to vision, what are your hopes for the community as we think about emerging out of this crisis?
Thanks. I think definitely increasing solidarity and empathy for communities furthest from opportunity. I think as a community, as a Chinese community and Asian community, not to be labeled or blamed or stereotyped. I think there's a fear as things go back to normal that we're already hearing, you know, children being bullied. So working with local school districts to ensure that there is safety, to that we're being proactive in our training, that even when things go back to normal, that's going to be a new normal, and how do we address these factors?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing, both you and Alma. This has been really powerful and rich information that you have brought to this table, voices from the community. As we look at everything that has been shared, I would like us to move to our journal prompt, where I'd like to give back about 2 minutes to each of you to think about, ingest what you heard, the emotions and the facts that were shared, and what's coming up for you, what's standing out for you from what you heard. So 2 minutes to do a journal prompt, and then we'll have 3 minutes to just popcorn style share on what's coming up for you. I'd now like to invite folks to unmute themselves and use the chat box to share how was that experience of Fishbowl and what is coming up for you.
Yeah, really quick. This is Carlos Jimenez from Redmond, Centro Cultural Mexicano. I think one part that really struck me is that I believe all of us are going to agree that cultural prejudice, it's really what's hurting the connection between our communities.
And this is Angie, Director of Centro Cultural Mexicano. I'm just going to add, you asked what's coming up for us. One thing, because we're a cultural organization, we like to connect and empower communities through art and culture. We have 8 large sculptures that will be appearing all through East King County in the coming weeks. That's done through 3 different organizations. And those sculptures are targeted to speak to the Latino community. And they will be addressing COVID-19 and the census. And we find that art is a really great way to include people, involve them, get people's attention, and then give information. So keep on the lookout for those.
Thank you for sharing, Angie and Carlos. Is there anybody else that would, I can see that Colleen from United Way has shared in the chat. Thank you for that. Thanks, Tom. Anybody else that can share about what that rich experience felt like for you and what stood out for you?
Hi, this is Debbie from Eastside for All and Eastside Refugee and Immigrant Coalition. Thank you, Alma. Thank you, Helen. I think you're naming some things that are so important, and that things that some of us hear a lot, but others may not hear at all, and then the continuum in between. So I really appreciate you sharing and that whole exercise. I appreciate Eastside for All taking this into the conversation today. I think what came up for me was just this ongoing acknowledgement of the layers of, we have individual racism, as Helen expressed, members of our community have been experiencing. And then of course we have the institutional and structural pieces. And I think when we are all looking at this or trying to look at this experience that we're all in from an equity lens, it can be very overwhelming. So I'm just, I'm feeling that, and I know in our own work, trying to do local systemic change, it's we have to constantly prioritize among things that all feel equally important and huge. And I know that that's something that many of us share. So I am just feeling the heaviness and the complexity of many of these things. And I just hope that we can all continue to have conversations about all the different ways that we can strategize, not just from a service delivery perspective or data, but all the parts of this together, because everybody here and many who aren't here bring parts of the puzzle and parts of what's necessary for us to move forward and beyond what we're doing right now. So thank you.
Yep, thank you so much, Debbie. You're absolutely right to summarize it the way that you did. The inequities that already existed before this pandemic have been exacerbated so deeply in these times. So it's really important for us to really think about and keep these voices in mind as we are creating solutions. I'm going to use that as a segue to move us into the next section. We heard a lot of emotions, so as they are coming up, please feel free to use the chat box to share. As Stephanie said, as a follow-up, we will make sure to share the cleaned up chat transcript and the whiteboarding as a reflection for you as you go back into your lanes. Today, for our check-in as a large group, we've been sharing a lot on these calls and in this platform, making connections. Everything has been very valuable, but the real work happens in between these calls when you go back to your lanes, and to keep these voices and all that we are hearing in our minds as we create solutions. For today, I'd like you to take about 30 seconds to journal for yourself and then unmute and share. How much are you doing? How much have you done? How well are we doing? And is anyone better off? I know there's some incredible work that's happening, and then we've heard about gaps, and then we've heard about clogs. So reflect on how much, how well, and is anyone better off? I will invite folks to unmute themselves, use the chat box to share. Melissa, I see that you shared a question. Would you like to unmute yourself and share it with the group?
Sure. Hi, my name is Melissa from the City of Kirkland Human Services. And I'm sorry to ask like a question that wasn't really related, but I was just looking to see if anyone in this call would have an idea. I had a resident reach out to me, and she actually was calling me during this call, but she reached out to the city wondering, the City of Kirkland wondering if there is any access, public access to a computer. now with having the libraries and community centers closed, she reached out to AA. She is a senior on a fixed income. So she reached out to AARP, Interconnect, Sound Generations, and with no luck, she also called 211. So I was wondering if anyone might have an idea. I was trying to do some research online. I saw that the city of Seattle had a really neat resource on where it divided internet access and public access to computer on a list, but they were all part of the library and community center, I guess, list. I was wondering if anyone had any ideas.
Excellent. I would encourage folks to respond to Melissa in the chat. I see folks sharing in the chat about the difference made. I'd also like to welcome anybody to unmute themselves and share with the group.
This is Carlos Jimenez again. It is one thing that it really makes a huge difference. The previous speaker was mentioning about the resources that the city of Seattle are offering to different communities at a different levels. Let's keep this in mind. The city of Seattle has a tremendous amount of resources. And when we are totally indifferent, we have only gained 10% or less of resources across the state and across King County. So that makes a huge difference. The services that the previous speaker are asking, that's because of lack of resources. So let's take that into consideration. 10% out of the entire amount of resources allocated for Eastside, while 30% goes to support, I don't think it's equitable. But we can do something about it.
Thanks for sharing, Carlos. Does anybody have any thoughts that are coming up from what Carlos spoke about funding? Anybody else that would like to share about the work that you're doing and the metrics, the performance measures that you have in place to know how well you've done, and is anyone better off?
Hello, it's Gloria from Lake Washington. I was thinking about the question around what difference that has been made or who's better off. I think when I think of it related to race and equity and the movement in our school district, it's been slow going, but we've had highlights. And I think there are people that are resistant to race and equity work for a variety of reasons. And some of it's being unsure or thinking, does this really make a difference? And I think working with a couple of departments that were more resistant to this, work with trying to work through the meals and other resources is having people think about equity more than they did before, but to avoid that white savior complex and move from, yes, we did these technical things to more adaptive, is really harnessing that to really think about what can we do different all the time and not just in a time of crisis, because we do our best work when we're adaptive work outside of a time of crisis. If not, we could keep sitting in the idea of we did this work and pat us on the back. But as a district, I think this could be a silver lining for those that were more resistant to the work. Because they're actually doing something that's technical, but it could actually shift their thinking in their belief systems.
Absolutely. I think you lift a very important point, Gloria. Thank you so much for that. Debbie, I see you mentioning that there are a lot of thoughts around funding. Do you want to unmute and speak to that, please?
I don't know that we have time, but
we have 2 minutes for you for sure.
I should not have typed that in. I just was indicating that there is a lot to speak about when it comes to funding. It's about Eastside specific funding, or it's about funding, making sure that that's equitable and getting to people who don't typically have access to funding. So we're in the middle right now of human services funding applications. Thankfully, they extended the date a bit, so from April to May. but many organizations are struggling to get those applications done, and we were hoping to have
You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if it's just.
Can you try speaking now?
Yeah, we were hoping to have a lot more diverse organizations applying this time for human.
I'm sorry, Debbie. You are breaking up.
Nope, that's okay. I will put myself. I'll put it.
Sorry, I think it was my connection. Everybody else was able to hear Debbie. I'm sorry for that. I see that Helena Stephens raised her hand. Helena, are you wanting to jump in?
Yeah, what I wanted to do was follow up on Gloria and probably touch on what Debbie is talking about regarding funding. So we're all in our respective organizations actually trying to react as much as possible to this crisis. And we're trying to do a myriad of different things in order to respond to the emergency at hand. At the same time, I don't know how we do it, but at some point we're going to have to start getting our organizations and the community standing up again to return to life. It won't be normal, but it'll be different than what it is this moment, because this is crisis moment, and then we'll return. What I'm asking is for people to take the information that we're gathering here now, whether it's regarding funding or communication, data, and begin, even if it's just a notebook of listing what we need to come back and visit after the crisis issue is over, so that we can change systems to be better prepared next time. And if we don't capture this information now, then when it gets lost and we forget about it, or we're so anxious to get back to normal that we fall back into old habits, rather than saying, what are we learning in this crisis moment that we can better help us prepare for the next situation that comes up, and to change how we're doing our work.
Thank you so much for that, Helen and Helena. And you take me to our next section, the breakout session, where we are going to be talking about making action commitments. Making action commitments, not just for now, but even as we emerge out to make system level changes. So for those of you who have participated in our breakout sessions, we will be magically, by the power of Zoom and Wiki, move you into smaller groups. You will have facilitators in each of your room. We also have Tom and Kathy who have agreed to be our facilitators. So thank you, Tom and Kathy. The effective question that we want you to reflect on as you move into your rooms is, how are you taking these tools that we shared, the information that you're hearing here, how do you plan to take all of this back to your organization or your community? So what is your action commitment? Who will you partner with, and who can you take along? So deliberate on these questions as we move to our breakout. Right after the breakout, we will have a small poll. It won't take you more than 40 seconds. We really want to hear your voice and get feedback from you so we can convene and make sure that you get what you need from these calls. So please be sure to stay for that. The breakout is for 10 minutes.
We have a new director of equity, diversity, and inclusion, so I want to make sure that she's on these calls. She just started last week, so I'm sure that's been interesting for her to start from a technology standpoint with technology. I really appreciated the continuum of from information to empowerment, and reminded myself to keep working on that commitment. And I echo, boy, the challenges of collecting data. I just, for the first few weeks, that just went out the door for us. I mean, it was completely about what service is needed this second, and how can we change and adapt to make that. And you know, I know that will come back in the future for us to have to try to unravel. But for now, yeah, I think what was most helpful today is really to be thinking about who we're missing, and how we can figure out ways to go out and work with communities that are missing. I don't know how, but Niso and Helen's comments were really helpful, at least to start looking at identifying who we're missing. Want to make sure all these comments go to our EDI committee. And then lastly, we have a corporation who's been reaching out to us each week for a conference call, and they are clearing the path for us. And I thought, who else could we be clearing the path for? And I'd like to model that.
Yeah, that's great, Lauren. Thank you. We have about a minute and a half left here. And I know in the call, I think it was last Thursday, Lauren, somebody from HopeLink specifically lifted up that HopeLink has made a strategic decision to really focus on that delivery, service delivery, and not able to capture data yourselves, however, partnering with others who are capturing data so that you're helping create it's pieces of the puzzle, and together you're creating the puzzle. So I think it's a great point to bring up. Sometimes in those technical solutions, which are critical and important, technical is not bad, you have to deliver the services. It's how, if you can't do it now, who are you partnering with to potentially get that data? Because it does illuminate eventually where there are opportunities to understand who we're missing, for sure. We have about 30 seconds left. Laura or anybody else want to add any other comments about how you're taking action and getting this information out to others?
Hi, this is Laura with Bellevue LifeBring. So just very quickly, I think the biggest action we've taken thus far is between two of us in Human Services. We do our very best in the fastest way possible to convert every resource we get into Spanish, because most of our clients are Spanish speaking.
That's great. Laura, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining.
Flyers in many different languages.
Great. Who else would like to talk about some of the tools and the information that you've heard today, and how you might take an action commitment to bring those back into your org?
Hi, this is Christine Mintier. I represent Bellevue Schools Foundation. And generally speaking, what I do is I take notes during the meeting. I don't usually wait for your guys' notes to come, and then I just send a quick email. There's 7 employees at Bellevue Schools Foundation, so I just kind of send them the information. And then we are partnering with LifeSpring and Bellevue School District. We rely on the Bellevue School District for all our information. We don't generate any data ourselves. We just get data from them. And then basically we're just trying to spread the information out to our donors about where the money's going to. I guess that's taking them with us. It's just letting them know where dollars are being diverted.
Christy Murphy from the Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue. The information that I get from these meetings, I send along to our CEO and my CFO as well. And then they compare it with other data that they have, because Bellevue School District is also providing breakfast and lunches to all of our kids that are attending our sites right now. And we have 3 locations that are open just for a meal service, so that the kids can come and receive breakfast and lunch. And then we also have a private donor that is providing dinners, and we're providing over 3,500 dinners and lunch and breakfast weekly.
Anyone else? Make sure you're not on mute if you are speaking.
Hi, this is Carlos from Bellevue LifeSpring. I'm a Human Services Administrator for the organization, and I think I look forward to partnering with NISO a bit more in terms of getting our program information across to the populations that are having issues with translations, and really getting the information distributed to them in the manner that they understand it. Yeah. I did take away from particularly Alma's speech on the ability to adapt for some programs, specifically for us in regards to our rental assistance program. It's important for our organization to listen to the community and other providers in regards to how their adaptability is creating a good resource and tool for these families who are in need to receive that assistance. So that's what I took away from some of the.
Anyone else? So I'm curious if anyone has ever done a factor analysis on anything back in their orgs like we did today, or any version of it, right? Because that's not a brand new tool. That's a method that other orgs use, or other known by many other names as well. Has anyone else ever done anything like that? Even if it's just like after a meeting, right? I remember when I worked at Verizon, after each meeting, we did a little plus delta, which was basically a factor analysis of the meeting. Well, here's an opportunity to try that when you get back to your org. By the way, the factor analysis, the charting that Peyton did, I will send out in our wrap up and also make available on our Google Drive. And there should be a blank egg chart that I sent out to everyone, but I'll also make that available in the Google Drive for today's meeting. If you want to access that and download it for your own use, you're more than welcome to. In fact, you're encouraged to.
Hey, Joe, do you mean by taking a look at, for example, what we've done with Bellevue Nourishing Networks is that we have looked at how many of the federally funded free and reduced lunch have gone out since the beginning of COVID, from the 3 grab and go in Bellevue. And I've asked for the numbers and kind of crunched all the numbers to find out that out of 20,000 students, we are serving 1,000 students a day. And that generated some questions in our minds as who we're not serving,
right,
and why. And so then what we decided to do is look at other school districts and see how they're distributing and how they're communicating the school lunch programs, and asking the question more, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this?
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, you can do that 5 whys too, which is great on you, right? You know, just to dig down to find out what the core issue is. The factor analysis is another tool you can use, you know, and again, that's why data is so important as well. First, you have to have the data, and then based on this data, you come up with some kind of maybe hypothesis or issue you want to deal with, and then it's like, okay, so what are the things that are, you know, keeping, you know,
right,
who are the people that aren't showing up to get the lunches, and based on that, why are some showing up, and why are the ones that aren't showing up, why aren't they showing up really? And the whole thing with the factor analysis is, one, you sort of have this brainstorming session around it, and then you pick what seem like might be the most logical or impactful factors of each of those. And then you go out in the community and you validate those to make sure it's not just you doing groupthink in a room, right? So step 2 of the factor analysis is always going out and validating some of those assumptions. And then hopefully after that, coming up with some workable solutions.
Tammy,
that make sense?
Could you email me some of that information? Because we actually had a staff meeting this morning and we were trying to give information to our donors, and we've gotten all sorts of different numbers from the Bellevue School District, and we couldn't really keep track of what was real and what wasn't real, because we've gotten a lot of different information. I would love to get what you have.
Hello, everyone. My connection is a little wobbly today, so I am going to go off my video in a bit if I get an intimation. I'm excited for the 6 of us to be in this breakout. The question that we're really thinking about is, what is the action commitment that you can make in your role to take the tools that you're hearing about here and to take all the information that folks are sharing back to your organization or back to your community? So what is your action commitment? And who will you keep in mind to take along as you go into solutioning when you go back to your organization? So how about we take 30 seconds to do that prompt for ourselves, and then we can start sharing. All right. Is there anybody that is ready to get us rolling? Chris, do you mind me starting with you? As a community volunteer, as an individual in the community, when you look at these tools that we shared about and all the information that got shared, how do you look at activating yourself? What is your action commitment?
Well, this is somewhat easy for me because of my longstanding involvement with Eastside Pathways. I feel like I'm better suited to plug into the new paradigm of whatever's going to come out of this at the other end. Hopefully a better, stronger, more resilient society. But I feel lucky to have been connected already, so I feel like I'm able to engage. Specifically, the work I'm doing with the Providers Council and the Eastside Early Learning Facilitators. One of the prior speakers brought up funding, and I think it's really important that we work to continue to fund those organizations so we can bring the co-creation aspect into our work in a more robust manner.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anybody else that would like to go next? I can see all your names. Hey, Cassandra, way to go. Can I unmute you? Okay, let me see how I can unmute you. Oh, it doesn't let me unmute you. Okay, is it working now? Oh, I'm unable to unmute you.
Now? Can you
Yes.
hear me now? Okay, great. One thing that Lake Washington School District has been working on religiously has been the an equity policy, and we want to come forward with, you know, very strong statements on our beliefs and how we're going to be working toward that. And I think this unfortunate opportunity, like Gloria said, has caused everyone to scramble to try and reach every person. So it's happening now faster than it unfortunately would have happened at any other time. And this will affect our policy at a board level and therefore a district level.
Excellent. And my question to you is, are you also thinking about how you can take this forward as we emerge out of this? These connections that you're making, this equity lens that you're holding at the center.
I would say that I don't know which groups Gloria's talking about that were resistant to this equity work, but now they don't have a choice because it's going to continue. And we're finding new ways to communicate and to reach out to, you know, the special populations that we haven't been able to reach. And I would add special education in those special populations, because that's another area where parents are really overwhelmed with increased aggression and some, you know, developmentally delayed students. This is a whole new world for them. So this will continue forward.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Can I invite Stephanie or Amy to jump in? And Helen, then I'll get you in as well. Stephanie, would you want to jump in and talk about how you plan to take this back to your organization or your community? Amy, would you like to get in a word about your action commitment? Okay, as they figure out, I don't know if they're unable to unmute. Helen, do you want to step in and take us along, talk to us about your action commitment?
Yeah, I mean, I think as this is our 12th meeting, so just the idea of being intentional. How do I take that information back to my, agency who should be at the tables at these meetings and being able to hear that? And how do I share out the information, the resources, and around the table each time that I attend? And I think really, like, as Cassandra was saying, how can we take that information that we've learned? Some of it we knew prior and some we didn't, and how to just help to impact equitably policy, challenge the normal way that we were doing things, and how to sort of provide that equity lens in the work that we do in a more concrete way.
And we in the last few calls, we spoke about populations that are getting missed, right? We spoke about there are, even now as we are solutioning, there are populations that are not getting the resources. And do you have a strategy in mind about not just equitably supporting your community, but also the populations that we might not be seeing, who are in need but are not getting the resources?
Absolutely. I think when you work from that equity framework, and what I keep hearing and learning and knowing is that when we work with those that are most marginalized, we lift up everybody.
Right.
So it's not about working in silos. It's not about what about this population or what about that population. It's really about that intersection of marginalization, and how do we then work, from not top down, but, community based up, to really work to create, as somebody was saying, an opportunity to develop systems that are much, much more equitable.
Right. And also really the concept of targeted universalism, right? Like one size does not fit all. So to understand the needs specific to the community that you're serving and be able to devise with them. So those who are impacted are on every table. Cassandra, we just have about a minute, I think. I wanted to bring your voice in. I know that you spoke about how you said as a board from Lake Washington School District that you might be engaging your youth only in the inform and the consult and not in the collaborate. So can you speak more to that?
Yes, student voice is missing right now in our district, and we've been working on what type of a student board could the board of directors bring in to work with us, and we haven't settled on a model that we want yet. But we also need to be asking students right now, and this will be coming out in like a graduation survey, what is it you need academically? What are you able to access? Is it too much work? Is it not enough work? Are your college goals for high school students, are you on track? Now the counselors are doing great work, but they're dealing with hundreds of kids at a time.
Right.
And a lot of kids are under pressure from parents right now about landing in a good college despite this type of uncertainty. And that is a tremendous amount of pressure for kids to be under on top of the rest of this. So we need to be better about engaging students. We got to find some Snapchat way of getting their attention.
Via channels that they relate to most.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the sharing. We'll be magically back into the large group in another 20 seconds. So I will see you back there. So this is our time to for the poll. So I will request Vicky to bring up the poll for us. Like I said, your feedback is valuable. It helps us design these calls in a way that it can serve you best. So please take this poll. Thank you. I can see the number of people who are taking the poll going up. So thank you so much for sharing your feedback with us. We are moving to once a week convenings, the meetings from next week on. So it'll really help for us to know what your preference of day is. Twenty more seconds. And then I'd like to invite a couple of folks to just unmute themselves and share their own action commitment. What commitment have you made to take these tools, the information, back to your organization or your community to drive action? Just 7 more people who need to take the poll.
I heard some good action commitments in the group I was in.
Mm-hmm. Joe,
But I'm not going to speak for anyone.
Do you want to ask folks from your team, nudge them to unmute and share?
That's what I was doing in an oblique way.
Let's do it in a little bit of a more obvious way.
Come on, folks, speak up. There were some great commitments that could be great models for other folks.
Come on, Joe's team.
Okay, Joe, here you go. I'm going to send some data over to Bellevue Schools Foundation to help them answer some questions about school lunches and some questions that came up in their board meeting this morning.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Tammy Waddell from Bellevue Nourishing Networks.
Thank you, Tammy. Can we have one more person share, please? Somebody from Tom or Kathy's group.
Okay, and one more from Tammy. I'm sending an email off to Christy because I want to kind of get some more data from her on the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club and the lunches that are going out. So that's my action item there too.
Thank you for sharing, Tammy. Is there one more voice that would like to come in? Helena? Was that you putting your hand? Oh no, okay. Okay, so feel free to share your action commitment in the chat because it's important for you to stay accountable to yourself and for us to keep each other accountable. So with that, I would like to hand this over to Stephanie to close us out. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your feedback with us. Stephanie, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Sandy. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for participating. And most really, really important, I don't know if it's most important, but extremely important is that opportunity for each of you to think about the action that you're taking between these calls. And so Tammy in particular, I really appreciate you unmuting. It is learning in public. We heard a lot at the beginning about what things we need. We're building relationships, even though it's through virtual. And that's why the opportunity to see each other's faces during this time is really important. It brings us out of isolation, especially as we're trying to figure out the best ways that we can work together so that we can get optimal supports and services for those most in need in our community right now, which is really, really critical. And then really continuing to understand how we can understand data and the stories and the input so that we can continue to get better and really understand those who are missing, and starting to think about different strategies for different populations. That also is really important. So I just wanted to say thank you to each of you for participating, for the work that you're doing in the community. And again, we're going to be meeting on Thursday. Next week, we'll be going to 1 day a week. Your input in today's poll will help determine which day that will be. Thank you for taking the poll. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking action. Until Thursday, be well.